Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Justin Loutfy, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born and go all the way up to today. One of the things that we know is our listeners are going to connect with you about something that they have in common with you about your life story. So with your permission, by the way, super excited about our time together. I know you can't tell because I hide it well, but let's start with where you were born.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I was born in Philadelphia. I tell people the greatest city in the United States, since that's where everything was born. Baby. Exactly, yeah. City of brotherly love.
That's it.
And between Philadelphia and South Jersey is where I grew up. But I think things really started for me when I was 18, 19 years old. I, did your normal path, went off to college, went to state school, but then I got kicked out of college, arrested, and I lost my scholarship. Right. So I find myself at 18 years old. Arrested, kicked out of college. And so I found myself trying to figure out where to go from there.
Yeah.
And as you can guess, there are not a lot of people that want to hire somebody who just got arrested and kicked out of college.
No
and so I ended up being a door-to-door salesman. So I was a door-to-door salesman in Philly, in Jersey, in New York for about 8 months.
What'd you sell?
I was doing leads for a company called Power Windows and Siding. So I'd be that guy that would show up to your door, said, hey, we're doing some work down the street. I'm just here to give you a heads up. While I'm here, if you want, we can have somebody come by and give you a quote on your windows and siding. And that's what I did. And when I first started, I was not good because it's a really awkward place. It's like the least loved person next to telemarketers is people that are coming to your door trying to sell you things.
Yeah.
So I realized that I had to do it faster than everybody else because I wasn't a good salesman. So I would just pack my lunch and really knock more doors than everybody.
Really?
That's cool. I love it. So that I could get to a point where I saw more people, I got more leads, and then eventually I ended up being the number one salesman in that group.
Yeah, you did.
But I reached a point that I found I wasn't really on a path that I wanted to be on. I was on like a good path in sales because I was starting to get really good at sales.
Yeah.
They were talking about having me open up an office somewhere else. But I remember specifically, I was up in North Jersey. It was like around Thanksgiving. I called my dad up, said, hey, I think I'm going to come down for Thanksgiving. What are you guys doing?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, honestly, we're driving up to Pittsburgh. Your uncle just passed away. Now, my uncle was like 30, 35 years old. So he was really young. And, my dad's telling me about the story, but he said something that really stuck with me. He said, it just goes to show you how short life can be sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, I started thinking about what I wanted my life to look like, what I wanted my life to look like if I ever had kids like I do now. I didn't want my story to be started working at 18, made a lot of money. And so the next day, I went to my boss's office and put in my 2 weeks, and I enlisted in the Air Force 2 weeks later.
Wow. So, okay, hold on. How old are you?
At the time I was 19. So I was
so
there from 18 to 19.
Pivot.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just for 1 second, let me just, if it's okay, I just want to ask a couple of questions. So when you were growing up in Philly, South Jersey, right? Or Philly, North Jersey, pardon me, right? When you were growing up in that area, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
For me, it was, so my parents divorced when I was really young. They had me when they were 18, 20 years old. So statistics are against you at that point.
My mom got pregnant at 18, had me at 19.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So whenever my dad would come pick me up, he would always try to make it really special. Like we would go on bike rides in Fairmount Park. So the area that you see Rocky running through would go into the art museum. Like we'd go ride our bikes there, or we would go out for sandwich chores or go get crabs. But my absolute favorite thing that we would do is he would pick me up. We'd go get sandwiches, and then we would drive to the end of the runway at the Philadelphia airport and watch airplanes take off.
Yeah,
And it was just this empty parking lot, but sometimes the airplanes would be so close that you looked like you could just reach up and touch it.
Right.
And so like that love of airplanes stayed with me, where I used to love just driving down there by myself when I was older. And then I realized, as I grew, when I was in the Air Force, I would drive to different airfields when I had like big life decisions to watch all these airplanes take off.
Wow. That is so cool. My dad did the exact same thing with me.
I do it with my daughters now.
Isn't that wild?
There's a diner at this local airport that just sits right on the edge of the runway. And so I'll take them there, and they love it. They love airplanes. It makes me so happy.
Yeah. And the food, by the way, in the airport diners is the best on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tiny one, like with little Cessna planes, but it's the coolest thing just to sit there.
Yeah. But just so we're clear, some of the best food you'll ever have in your life, right? And you get to sit there and have breakfast or whatever, right? And watch the planes take off. And I mean, it's really, really cool. One of my favorite stories ever, and I have never told it to anybody on the podcast. One of my favorite stories ever is a guy that sat at a table at the end of a charity golf tournament that we played in. And I sat down and he said, "So you're Mike Litton?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "So you own a very large real estate office?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And you own a mortgage company? "Yeah." And he goes, "So how's it going?" And I said, "Well, it's going well. We're doing well, this and that." And he goes, "Do you remember a company called Cal Stores?" And I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I used to buy my jeans there and my t-shirts and all that kind of stuff, right? When I was 19 years old, Cal Stores was a big deal out here. And so I used to go there. They had the best prices and stuff. And so I'd go there and buy stuff." And he goes, "I owned it. I started it." I'm like, "Really? That's so awesome. I'm actually meeting a local celebrity, right? Let me shake your hand," right? And he goes, "Yeah," but he goes, "I had to get out of the business." And I'm like, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, I had 14 locations." And he said, I had a blood pressure problem. I go to the doctor, and the doctor says, "You're a ticking time bomb. You've got to detach from this. You have to figure something out that you can do where you don't think about business, where you don't think about these 14 stores, you don't," right? He said, "We looked like we were absolutely killing it every year." He said, "Every month we barely had enough left to feed my family. Jeez. We barely had enough left to pay taxes," right? So he goes through this whole story with me. Turns out the doctor says, "Listen, tell me what it is that you can do where you can unplug." And he goes, "Flying." He goes, "I've always wanted to get my pilot's license." He said, "Then go get your pilot's license." So he goes out to Palomar here in Carlsbad, the Palomar airport. Goes out to Palomar. He's getting ready to go do his first solo. He's checking all the stuff on the outside, doing the walk around that you're supposed to do, the inspection, right? Checking the ailerons and the rudder and all this stuff. And this jet flies in, this private jet flies in. Every time a private jet flies in, you stop what you're doing and watch, right? And he goes, "I always watched, and when they pulled up and the thing came down, to see if it was somebody famous," right?
Who is this? Yeah.
Yeah. He goes, "And this guy gets off the plane, and it's a coworker of mine from 25 years ago." He's like, "No way," right? So he goes over, shakes his hand. He goes, "Hey, let's get together and grab lunch." So they do. Turns out that guy owned a chain of stores. I'm going to make this real fast. It's a longer story than this, but it turns out he owned a chain of stores, right? That was his jet. He owned a chain of stores. He took every single store that he owned, bought the property, bought the store, the actual real estate, closed the store, turned around, leased it out. So he went to the worst one at first and went all the way to the favorite one, closed all of them down, and bought the real estate. And now his blood pressure is completely fixed. He has 1.5 employees, and he makes money hand over fist. And I said, "How about the jet?" He goes, "I got one on order."
You guys your own jet. Yeah.
Right? You with me? It's like, dude, right? So that's, so real estate changed his life massively. And he's like, "I just wanted to share that with you." And I'm like, "I'm so glad you did." You know what I mean? So sometimes you sit down, and it's like, you probably have figured out by now, we haven't known each other that long, but you probably have figured out by now that I really haven't met a stranger. So usually when I sit down, even if people don't want to talk to me, I just start talking to them, and we strike up a conversation, and you won't believe the stuff that comes from that. It's crazy.
It's true. When you just
So
start asking
I never had
questions.
a challenge when it came to sales. I was just the opposite, right? So yeah. So this is cool. So you end up joining the Air Force,
Yep.
and the idea behind it is you love airplanes. So are you planning to be a pilot? Is that why you joined the Air Force?
Originally, yeah. Well, one, I knew I needed direction. I couldn't
Yeah.
afford college anymore, so I had to find a way to pay for college. I knew I needed direction, and I wanted to be a pilot. So I first enlisted and became an aircraft mechanic with the
What happened
goal.
with the arrest? Did the Air Force have an issue with it?
Well, I mean, I hired a lawyer and it became okay, so that went away.
Oh,
But
I got you.
it took like maybe 6, 8 months just kind of going through that process.
Yeah.
Um, where it ended up just being a misdemeanor, and so I had to pay a big fine, and thankfully
So it
life
was on
moved
your
on.
record and you told the Air
Yeah,
Force about it and they were okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool.
You know,
That's
so,
awesome.
yeah, it worked out, and I tell people it was like this mistake that needed to happen in my life because otherwise I would not have been on the path that I came on today.
This
Right?
is why we have you tell your life story on tape, by
Yeah,
the way, because this is the kind of stuff, right? All of a sudden, God throws something in your path and you have to pivot. Okay.
exactly.
It's amazing. So let me ask you this. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you growing up?
Um, I was fortunate in that I've had a bunch.
Mhm.
I didn't have like the most supportive environment at home, but I had a lot of people that would reach out and kind of show me love and just have these little glimpses of light, from a math teacher that drove me to school every day, or a swim coach that let me swim for free, when I couldn't afford to go join the swim team.
Yeah.
Like little things like that along the way really helped me, and
Yeah.
it allowed me to just kind of grasp onto other people's stories to see like, okay, these are the type of men that I want to be like.
Yeah. Well, it teaches you how to be a man,
Yeah,
right? And you
exactly.
remember vividly how you felt when they helped you. And what's amazing is it makes you want to go do that for people.
Yeah, and it's you find I'm sure you agree, but like you find when you get to this point in life that you're very comfortable with yourself, it allows you to really focus outward and help other people and reach out. And the thing I've learned most this year, especially after publishing the book and after like getting on these stages and speaking, is the more that I speak out, the more people, like you said, come to me and say, wow,
Yeah.
this is something that impacted me. Like this tiny piece of this story really helped. And that's been my goal my whole life.
Yeah.
Whether I was in charge of a 4-man fire team or a $24 million company, my whole goal has always been to be one of those 4 or 5 people that just left that giant impact on your life,
Yeah.
that you look back and say, you know what, Justin really changed my life for the better.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't hardly sleep last night, because I knew we were getting together today. No, I'm not joking, man. I've been so excited about this ever since you scheduled this on our scheduler. I was like, oh, this is cool. One of the things that has been a recurring theme with my life is nobody has ever outworked me. No matter what it was I did, I always outworked everybody, right? Whether it was eating in my car, like bringing my lunch, eating in my car, leaving earlier, staying later, showing up on weekends, whatever. I always outworked my competition. And then they
Yeah.
would whine about it, right? They would whine to people, including me, about how hard I was working. Okay, right? It's like, go ahead, I love it, man. So you join the Air Force initially to get into flying planes. Then
Right.
what?
So I said I enlisted, I was an aircraft maintainer.
Okay.
Um, and I went to basic training, which was in San Antonio,
Mhm.
and kind of got the lay of the land. You get down there, and it's to me it was very simple because they tell you everything to do, tell
Yeah.
you when to wake up, like where to put your socks, which socks to put on, and I was about it. I was like, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
All I have to do is listen to everything you're saying, and that's performance in this.
Mhm.
And so from that, I got this idea. I said, you know what? I think I want to go to the Air Force Academy
Oh, cool.
because if the Air Force Academy is anything like this, I could do this for 4 years.
Yeah. I
And
love
so
it.
when I got out of the basic training, I told it to my dad. I said, "Hey, I think I want to apply to the Air Force Academy." And he said, "Well, let's wait a minute. Your brain, you're still kind of in basic training mode. Let's reintegrate you back into life. We'll see if you want to do this later."
Hmm.
Right. So I still have this idea. So, I want to go to the Air Force Academy. Pilots come out of there. That sounds like a great idea.
Mhm.
And so I start working out every morning at the base gym. And one morning I ran into a man named Colonel Quint. Now,
Hmm.
Colonel Quint was my boss's boss's boss at the
Ooh.
time. I'm just like this wrench turner on the flight line.
Mhm.
He's the maintenance group commander. And
Ooh.
we end up striking up a conversation. I said, I'm really thinking about going to the Air Force Academy. And it turned out he was an academy grad.
I love it.
And so then he ended up taking me under his wing, like showing me how to apply, really encouraging me and putting me in touch with other people in different jobs around on the base so I could see what existed in the Air Force.
Mhm.
And until the point that I got accepted into the Air Force Academy, and he was the first person to call me the minute after that happened because he knew before I did.
Oh, wow. That's so cool, dude. I just love it when God throws mentors in our way, right? And
Yeah.
you never see it coming, right? You went and worked out one day, not knowing what was getting ready to happen, but you run into him, you strike up a conversation, and it starts this entire life-changing relationship. I mean, that's just awesome. I love that.
What I found
And by the way,
lately,
the Air Force Academy is gorgeous. We toured there when I was a kid.
oh, it's so beautiful up there.
It really is. So you go to the academy?
I did. I ended up getting flown out there to take a tour of it, and
Mhm.
they handed me my acceptance there.
Oh,
Um, Funny story was, so when I was in basic training, I went through basic training with a dude from Oregon,
mhm.
and I grew up in Pennsylvania with like the Appalachian Mountains and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I'm telling him, it's like, yes, I've seen mountains. I know what that looks like. You have the Appalachians here. And he said, no, those are hills. Like that's not a mountain. I said, it's called the Appalachian Mountains. Like
Oh, I
it's
love
on
it.
the map. And then I went I went
They're
to
actually called
Colorado.
mountains
Right, it
on the
says
map.
mountains. This is a mountain range. But then I went to Colorado and I saw, like, when you're sitting in the dining hall of the Air Force Academy, it's just all windows, and so you
Yeah.
see the front range, and I messaged him. I was like, "Okay, I get it. Like, those were hills. These are mountains."
Rockies, something
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely gorgeous, like you said.
Oh,
It's
I
such a
love that area. I mean,
beautiful
that's
area.
one of my favorite places in the world. I think it's so pretty there. My aunt and uncle still live there, in fact, but they lived in Denver for many, many decades, and we used to go visit them and stuff. And yeah, beautiful. So you go to the Air Force Academy. What was that experience like?
It was really cool. I still had this idea that I wanted to be a pilot, right?
Okay.
So I was never a great student academically, but there are a lot of different ways to excel at the academy, and one way is to become a glider instructor pilot.
Okay.
So gliders are, planes that get towed up into the air and they just let go and there's no engine. And so the people that are glider instructor pilots have kind of a fast track to become pilots in the Air Force.
Okay.
And so I
Wow.
set that as my goal. Around sophomore year, I became
Mhm.
a glider instructor pilot.
Okay.
Um, Now the turning point for me was I loved flying. Still
Mhm.
do. Like I think especially you love Colorado, like seeing Colorado from 10,000 feet up
Yeah.
is absolutely gorgeous.
It's stunning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is.
But the problem I was having was that in that little environment, like in the our little glider pilot area,
Mhm.
everyone was always kind of evaluating themselves against each other. Because
Oh,
when you're in the plane, it's just you, right?
yeah.
So just you in the plane. And as a student in that, everyone's like, okay, how many flight hours do you have? Like, how many times did you fly? And they're really not asking because they want to see like you perform. They want to know, how do I stack up against you?
Gotcha.
And I've always been a really competitive person, but I'm not a competitive person in the fact that I want you to lose. I'm a competitive person in the fact that
You
I
want to
want to
help lift
beat
them up.
everybody, but I
Yeah.
want to raise the bar of competition.
Right.
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 And so I started to really question if pilot was the right place for me because I knew I didn't want to go to like big planes
Mhm.
because my dad like was in that and it wasn't really the kind of lifestyle I wanted.
Right.
And the idea of being a fighter pilot like fit with my competition, but didn't fit with this idea that I wanted to be a part of a team.
Okay.
And so I started to explore this idea of special warfare. and looking
Okay.
at like Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Air Force Special Warfare. And I went to a really good friend of mine and said, man, I thought I wanted to be a pilot my whole life.
Mhm.
And now I'm here. Like we're only 2 years away and I'm right on track.
Mhm.
I don't think I want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so I flew out to Coronado to meet with a buddy of mine and to see what that world looked like, and spent just kind of a weekend out there looking at the Navy SEAL bases and stuff. And I came back and said, you know what? I'm going to go into Air Force Special Warfare. And so I stopped being a glider instructor and started waking up at 4 a.m. so that I could just start running and getting better and getting ready for the Air Force Special Warfare pipeline.
Wow. So do you go to BUDS?
No, so I didn't go into the Navy. I
Okay.
stayed in the Air Force. But the Air Force has its own branch of special warfare where you have, pararescue and combat controllers and TAC-Ps. And I ended up becoming what's called a TAC-P or a JTAC, where I got to work with different special operations teams like Green Berets and the SEALs, and I also got to work with Army Infantry and a bunch of other like international teams.
Mhm.
But I couldn't dive, so I couldn't go into the Navy.
Well, I got you. So what does so I didn't know this. I'm legitimately asking. So the Air Force has special warfare um, units.
Yep.
So what would you do like with for the Green Berets or the SEALs or whatever? Were you
So
pilot or were you
no, so I would be another person on the ground, right?
okay?
So when you think about any combat team, um, we'll take like Navy SEALs. So when Navy
Yeah.
SEALs go out, you have a team of Navy SEALs,
Yeah.
but then they also will usually take maybe one or two Air Force guys with them. And a
Really?
lot of the times, one of them is a JTAC, which is a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, where that person, if everything is going wrong, the JTAC has the ability to call in and direct airstrikes or use any other weapon that is in the vicinity to help get that team out of that situation and keep everybody safe.
Oh wow. So you're the lifeline.
Right.
Wow. Wow. No pressure there. So how long did you do that for?
I did that for 5 years, and that was a ton of fun
I'll bet it was.
because, you have this just highly selected group of men that all have the same kind of type A personality, that are all what we call competitive excellence.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm very competitive, but I love this idea of competitive excellence where everyone's going to come in and work off to be the best.
Right.
But it's more so to just raise the bar of competition. It's not to put anybody down, because I want you to work harder, because then it makes me have to work harder to
Yeah.
continually try to be the best.
Yeah.
And that was an environment I just fell in love with.
Yeah. I can imagine. That's your gig. That's like how
Yeah,
you're built.
exactly.
That's awesome, dude. So you're in it for 5 years. What made you leave?
It was my daughter. So I
Okay.
had our first daughter was born, and as a JTAC, you're gone a lot. So I would travel maybe 2 weeks out of every month, and then I deployed for 6 months,
Mhm.
which isn't great.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.